Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome back for another edition of the Double Wave Yellows podcast. Today, we are reviewing the 2021 Styrian Grand Prix, and joining me, as always, are Hodders and Tyson. Hello to you both. Hodders, we had eventful races in the support series, but unfortunately, the main event was a bit of a damp squib.
Yeah, and it could have been a very wet swim had it not been for the weather being a little late, but the support race, very much worth watching.
And we'll hear a bit more about that in just a minute. Tyson, a dominant performance again from Max, as we'll hear later on. It could be that it's now more and more the momentum is focused with the Red Bulls.
Yeah, it's very much looking that way, but we've seen it before. One race can change everything.
Absolutely, it can. We'll talk more about the Formula One Grand Prix a little bit later on. But first of all, Hodders, we had the W Series for the first time in 18 months. The new series for the 2021 W Series Canada. What happened in the Styrian event?
More than just 18 months. For the first time in 685 days, the women took to the track in the second series of the W Series, with Jamie Chadwick setting out to defend her title won in 2019. Of the 18 drivers, 12 returned, having finished in those positions in the first series, with 6 debutants and also 5 reserve drivers, and it's now a full-on F1 support series. Now, those reserves, one of whom is already racing, one of them is Gosia Radest, who is currently standing in for South African Tamsin Pepper, who, due to South African COVID restrictions, cannot race yet, but she is a reserve driver alongside others, including the likes of Naomi Schiff. Another move this year is a move towards commercial sponsor-supported teams, with a move towards full-on teams from 2022, not so much constructors as sponsors because they'll have the same car. 6 teams have partners where the others are in their own teams, including the 2 youngest drivers under the Academy W umbrella. Now, for those who don't know, you could almost say that W Series is a little bit of bite-sized racing because all sessions are 30 minutes. It's a 30-minute practice on the Friday, followed by qualifying later in the afternoon. And then on the Saturday, it's a 30 minutes plus 1 lap. So think about Formula E, but slightly shorter. Not much to talk about in practice because it wasn't televised, unfortunately, but qualifying is. Alice Powell taking pole with Sarah Moore second and rookie Belen Garcia third. Small surprise in the qualifying positions. Jamie Chadwick, returning champion, down in P8. That was due to a turbo issue. Now, I can't talk about lap numbers during the race because it was in minutes, so I'll talk as long as it was a football match in terms of what minute it was in the race. At the end of the first lap, a bit hectic and chaotic, with Jamie Chadwick spinning off following contact from the rear by Jess Hawkins, which meant that Jamie went from 8th all the way down to 16th for a good part of the race. And then there were the occasional battles in the back and middle of the field, which was very pleasing to see throughout the race. Unfortunately, Belen Garcia's third position that she qualified in dropped down to 9th after coming off the track, rather unfortunately due to a lock-up 17 minutes into the race. We did have a retiree in the 20th minute, Marta Garcia. She just went off, and I think it was sort of a power failure, but unfortunately, or fortunately for some, it did bring out, unlike other races, the safety car in the 22nd minute. That was out in place for 5 minutes, which of course brought the field closer together, and also meant that when the racing resumed about 3 or 4 minutes to go, it really did turn into a very competitive race. Another contacts incident happened. Unfortunately, Kim Alainen collided with Vaitska Visser, who was running in third place at the time, who ended up dropping back to the back of the pack due to that contact, but recovered to 12th in the end. Unfortunately, Kim Alainen's crash didn't really help. She had a damaged front wing, which eventually flew off a couple of minutes from the end of the race, fortunately off the track, and she finished 13th. So in the end, Alice Powell doing the triple, really. Fastest lap in qualifying, and the win as well. Sarah Moore qualified second, finished second, and third on the podium, the Liechtenstein driver Fabian Volvend, who is driving under a Swiss licence, but she is classed as representing Liechtenstein. Plenty of battles after the safety car, even at the tail end of the field and the middle field. It was interesting to see how close some of the gaps were, especially when you consider that, unlike Formula One, the W Series cars do not have DRS. Now, there were a couple of changes to the results after the race, as it was determined during the race that the stewards would have a look, along with race control, at the crash between Jess Hawkins and also Jamie Chadwick. It did mean that while Jess Hawkins finished 5th, she did end up with a 30-second penalty, so she finished in 16th place. As for Kimmerlinen's collision with Bijtske she will end up wherever she finishes in the qualifying this coming Saturday, 3 places lower through a grid penalty. So next week we go again at the Austrian Grand Prix with another W Prix.
Lovely, thanks for the report, Hodders. And as you mentioned, there is round 2 of the W Series again from the Red Bull Ring, and this time around, Hodders, I believe for British viewers it will be live on Channel 4.
Yes, unfortunately, the first race was on All 4 due to other sports, but pleasingly, the full race will be on coverage from 3 p.m. on Saturday on Channel 4 and highlights the following Sunday morning. And one thing I discovered during the race weekend, that I didn't know, is that if you do wish to watch the qualifying on Friday afternoon, even if you can't watch it live, it is going to be on Channel 4 Sports YouTube channel throughout the season.
Lovely stuff. Thanks, Hodders. And so it was a good race to watch. Plenty of wheel-to-wheel action all down the field. And long may it continue. Right, let's move on to the main event, the Formula One Grosser Pre von Stereo, or something like that, the Styrian Grand Prix. So Verstappen achieves his 4th win of the season at Styrian after a comprehensive victory over Lewis Hamilton, who claimed the consolation prize of the faster and the point in second. Bottas beating Perez to the line in 3rd place to finish off the podium. So looking at the drivers who we were keeping a close eye on. So the first driver I was keeping an eye on this weekend was the Williams driver Nicholas Latifi. A very good performance in qualifying 1 meant that he qualified in P16. Unfortunately, he was caught up in a little bit of a mess involving a few other drivers, ended up pitting after contact on the first lap, dropped all the way down to last, which is where he stayed until he managed to pass Nikita Mazepin with 6 laps to go to finish, I believe, was P16, P17. I haven't got that written down, but anyway, Tyson, we don't really mention Latifi as much, but Latifi is starting to close the gap on his more illustrious teammate George Russell.
Yeah, I was really impressed with his qualifying 1 performance. It looked like he had a real shot at pulling himself into Q2 at one point.
Absolutely. And Horace, we say that the first person you need to beat is your teammate. He is closing that gap quite, race by race.
He definitely is. Well, George Russell's going from strength to strength. Latifi is starting to hold his own at the same time. Even if he is considered the secondary driver in Williams, he is definitely fielding his own battles.
And long may it continue. Hold us on to the first of the 3 that you were keeping an eye on, the Monegasque driver Charles Leclerc.
Oui, Matt the ref. Leclerc had a good weekend. He qualified P7, a full 5 places ahead of his teammate Carlos Sainz. He was able to finish in the same position of P7, although he was lucky to do so in some ways. He was caught up in some of the kerfuffle in the first lap and ended up having to pit after that first lap to change his tyres and his front wing. Ended up all the way down towards the end of the grid, but he did manage to claw his way forward during the race and finished off in 7th, which for him is a good achievement.
Yeah, an excellent achievement, considering what happened, but he will obviously wonder what might have been. Tyson, it's showing there's a vast gap in pace and performance between the Ferraris and the other midfield teams, and the Williams and the Haas, when Leclerc can fall over 35, 40 seconds behind the pack and yet still finish in P7.
Yeah, he did very well to come back through the field. Not much maligned for his good recovery race, but that's exactly what it was.
Mm-hmm. And he didn't need a safety car to recover that, so all the more a good performance. So looking at my second driver on my list was British McLaren driver Lando Norris. No, not Lando Stroll, before any of you lot chime in.
We would never.
No.
So Lando,
We do a thing like that.
so Lando qualifying in fourth place, again a superb Saturday performance. Started P3 after Valtteri Bottas was demoted 3 places. He stayed in third throughout his first stint, including rebuffing a challenge from Sergio Perez on the first lap. Unfortunately, Sergio did eventually get him on lap 10, and then Bottas passing him to take fourth on lap 17. But Norris staying comfortably leading the rest of the pack behind to finish fifth. Holders, another consistent performance from Lando.
Absolutely. I mean, he might be disappointed to finish slightly lower than his qualifying position for the championship by any means yet, but again, anything is possible in the next 15 races. He's very consistent. He has established himself as the top driver in McLaren, and he is showing that once again he can be competitive compared to other teams above.
Mm-hmm. And Tyson, we talk about those wacky races that crop up every now and then. If we do have one of those wacky races, Lando could be a driver to potentially be in there to win. Yeah, if he's there at the right time.
Absolutely, and I'd love to see it as well. Lando top step.
Absolutely, it'd be great to see. So let's see how the remainder of the season develops. And we inadvertently mentioned him just now. Hodders, the second driver you were keeping an eye on was Lance Stroll.
You got it right that time, yes. Lance Stroll, he was sort of middle of the pack throughout the whole weekend. He was middle of the pack during practice. He was around the top 10 throughout qualifying, eventually finishing in 10th, upgraded to 9th due to Yuki Tsunoda's grid penalty. By all accounts, he had a relatively quiet race. He was sort of in the middle of the pack and stayed there, stayed competitive in that middle pack. We seem to be getting sort of a peloton in the last few races where we have those in the middle fighting for points. Finished P8, another 4 points for the Aston Martin account, and a well-earned 4 points at that.
Absolutely, and for the likes of the peloton teams, the likes of Aston Martin and Alpine, just constantly adding little bits of points to their total throughout the season is obviously what they're looking for. Tyson, we talked a lot about Aston Martin last season. We thought, is Stroll just in that seat because of his dad, or is he rightfully earning his place? I think it's safe to say at the moment it's the latter.
Definitely. I have always been critical of Stroll because the consistency was never there. He would either have a good race or a bad race. This season, he's solidly mid-pack all the time. 8, 9, 10. Yeah, the consistency is coming to him now.
Mm-hmm. And say if he keeps, I suppose, obviously, also he's got a really good, experienced teammate in Sebastian Vettel, which is going to help him no end. So hopefully he continues to sort of stay with that peloton, perhaps even look to lead that peloton, as we seem to be saying here on Double Wave. As we will wait and see. And finally, my last 3 drivers I was keeping a watching brief on was the Alfa Romeo driver Antonio Giovinazzi, who had a really, really quiet race, qualified and finished in position 15. He was unfortunately caught out by the first lap mishaps. Past the 2 Haas cars early on, and then just stayed there towards the end. Hodders, Antonio Giovinazzi, he's got a very illustrious teammate to keep up with in Kimi Räikkönen. Sometimes he is, sometimes he isn't. He's a little bit inconsistent as Giovinazzi.
Inconsistent is a very fair term. I mean, he is in the footsteps behind, as it were, of the veteran Kimi Räikkönen. He does have his consistencies at times, but he just needs to make them well. For one's best term, more consistent. He has potential, he just needs to find it and utilise it.
Mm-hmm. And it may all just be, Tyson, that just having that one promising weekend where just everything clicks for him will just set that all in motion, set that momentum for the rest of the season.
Yeah, weekends like that will give him the confidence boost that he needs.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the flying fin, Hodders, tell us about Räikkönen's weekend.
To start the weekend, he was lower end in practice. When it came to qualifying, very, very disappointing result. He finished 18th, just in front of the 2 Haas's, which for a driver of his caliber would have been sort of a surprise, really. Having said that, he had a relatively quiet race and eventually managed to parlay that 18th up to 11th position, which I think after such a dire qualifying session, he can be quite pleased with.
Indeed. Tyson, this is something that is often discussed. You've got Kimi Räikkönen, who is driving around at the back of the pack. He is never going to get anywhere near the sort of success that he's previously had. He is, I think, the second oldest or the oldest driver on the grid into his 40s. Does Räikkönen need to be considering hanging up his helmet? Does he need to be giving another young driver out there the opportunity to drive in Formula One?
It's a tough one because an experienced driver like Kimi will always bring a wealth of experience to any team. But as we know, there's so few spots, so many young talents trying to come up through the lower formula. Maybe it might be time to move aside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see. And certainly his personality would be missed on the grid, but as I say, he has that wealth of experience. What do you think? If you're listening, do you agree? Do you disagree? Don't forget to put a comment in the below, and don't forget to like and subscribe as well. That's also important. Looking briefly at the penalties that were handed out by the race stewards, only 2 penalties that were handed out, both grid penalties. Firstly, Tsunoda got a 3-place grid penalty for impeding during qualifying 2, which is a fairly standard one. I think he just basically completely cut off one of the drivers going down to turn 4. The one that has caused a bit of contention, though, is Valtteri Bottas's 3-place grid penalty for a pit lane spin in practice 2, which was rather bizarre. He admitted to the stewards that he was trying to practice sort of getting a faster getaway from his pit stops because they've been losing time during the race because of that. Getting away in second gear rather than first, the stewards taking a very dim view of that. Hodders, was this penalty too harsh, or are the stewards right for setting a deterrent for dangerous driving in the pit lane, especially during practice?
I mean, I think we discussed that just after the fact at the time at that weekend, and having seen the incident myself, I don't think it's unduly harsh. I mean, it may seem harsh setting a deterrent, but dangerous driving wherever you are in the pit lane or out on the track can't really be tolerated. I mean, some might say it's making an example. I would say it's basically showing that the rules will be implemented and will be implemented evenly and fairly.
Mm-hmm. And Tyson, we've seen some really nasty incidents over the years with cars just colliding with mechanics, colliding with other cars in the pit lane. But for this to happen in practice, that seems a very strange thing for someone of Bottas' experience to do.
I think it's more fortunate that it happened in practice because it could have been a real situation if it happened during the race itself. But yeah, the pit lane, not really the place to be experimenting and trying different things. So I think the penalty was justified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think actually the stewards did allow for a little bit of mitigation on that 3-place penalty, given that he brought the car to a stop immediately, that he didn't really hit anybody, etc. So we may well see the likes of 5-place or even 10-place grid penalties being handed out if we see incidents like that again. Hopefully we don't, but anyway. And some other little bits of little nuggets of information that came out from this weekend's race. For once, no red flags in practice or qualifying. That driver's actually learning how to keep the cars on the track, which is good. Disappointingly, in going completely out against our prediction, we had no safety car or virtual safety car interventions during the race. One thing we did have, which has caused a little bone of contention between Red Bull and alleged other teams, are the change to the pit stop rules. Hodders, from what I understand, it is basically the mechanics can't rely on the sensor to tell them, yep, the wheel is fully tightened, it's attached. It's got to be their own feel through the wheel gun.
I mean, if it means slower pit stops but also safer pit stops, so be it. And I gather it's also in racing. There are various wordings and racing regulations that come into play. Sensors can, as we know with technology, it can and will go wrong.
Absolutely. And Tyson, we have seen so many pit stops go wrong over the last few years where the mechanic puts the wheel on and it's the sensor that tells the guy at the front, the car's all good to go, let him go. And then literally a second later we look back and the mechanic's waving his arm saying, no, don't let him go.
Yeah, we have seen a few incidents like that. Interestingly, we've not seen a lot of those incidents from Red Bull, and it seems to me this is being implemented to slow Red Bull down.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Red Bull, I think they were saying they've had, 5 or 6 of the best pit stops throughout the season. I don't think we've ever seen a Red Bull pit stop that has resulted in the car being released in an unsafe manner. So, and Mercedes also, they're saying, nope, we didn't protest the FIA about it. Obviously, I don't think we're going to get any teams that are actually going to sort of hold their hands up to that, but we'll just have to wait and see what pans out. So it may well be keep an eye on the pit stops in future, folks, because it may be we don't no longer see those sub 2-second pit stops. Moving on to our winners and spinners from the Styrian Grand Prix, and this was really, really difficult for us because there wasn't really much in terms of events throughout the field. We could only find one spinner between the two of us, which we'll have a mention of in a minute. Firstly, though, for me, my winner of the race was Charles Leclerc. As has been previously mentioned, he climbs all the way back up to 6th, but after ending the first lap in 18th after coming together on the first lap. And the fact that he did so, obviously, without any safety car or virtual safety car interventions, he had to come back on merit was a superb result. Hollis, we'll talk about your winner as well, because we haven't mentioned him as much, and a heartbreaking result for George Russell. Tell us about it.
Yeah, George Russell was my winner. I was minded to put him there anyway, even before what happened to him. I mean, he did so well during the race weekend, finished P11 in qualifying, upgraded to P10 following Yuki Tsunoda's grid penalty, so his first top 10 grid of the whole season, and goodness knows he has been trying so hard to get into Q3 as well, and I think he will eventually. Got up to 8th position during the race, and then his couple of pit stops harmed him as well for various reasons, brake-wise and what have you, and then the power unit failing 2/3 of the way during the race. It was utterly heartbreaking. He was in the running for the points, and I think had he finished the race in that position, I think he would have been ours in the official driver of the day. So the winner is not based on the race result, but more on what could have been.
Absolutely. And Tyson, it's not just George Russell, but it's Williams. They so badly need these points after some awful years, in particular for the new owners. It would be just such a feel-good story for Formula One if Williams, and in particular George Russell, can get into that top 10 for the finish.
Yeah, Russell and Williams are just desperately unlucky right now. It seems whenever there's an opportunity there for them to score some points, get something on the leaderboard, something happens.
Mm-hmm. It may well be, they've had all the bad luck over the last few races. It may well be that the event when the bad luck is happening to somebody else, it happens to George Russell and to Williams. We will wait and see. Hollis, you couldn't pick a spinner because you just didn't think anyone had a particularly bad day. But for me, Pierre Gasly, who qualified well inside the top 10, he threw away a huge haul of points potentially within the opening 2 or 3 corners. Just 2 silly little collisions that basically absolutely wrecked his rear suspension and his rear wing. Amazingly, he actually got back to the pits given that his left rear wheel was just hanging off. Hodders, this was a bit of a surprise from Gasly, because Gasly is someone you can usually rely on for a good performance.
Absolutely. I mean, Gasly has had some absolute stunners the last few races. This season has been very strong as a whole. But to throw everything away so quickly, and indeed needlessly, in that first lap is just uncharacteristic of him. I mean, I think it was a momentary lapse of concentration or something else, but he really does need to concentrate as we go again this weekend.
And Tyson, I say it might just be one of those one-off performances that we see from Pierre, who is otherwise a very solid driver, not just for his team, for AlphaTauri, but across the grid as a whole.
Yeah, he's definitely shown before he can get the job done. Disappointing what happened at the Styrian Grand Prix, but he's got a chance for redemption this weekend.
And hopefully he does indeed redeem himself with a strong race performance. So looking at the talking points now for the weekend, and we go straight into the championship battle, Lewis versus Max round 8. And I think the points from all of the judges are in the view that it is a conclusive victory for Max Verstappen. Honda's superb performance by Red Bull on their home ground, effectively. Just Lewis and Mercedes had absolutely no answer.
They really didn't. I mean, it got to the point where Lewis went onto that pit stop for the last lap just to get the fastest lap point to almost indulgent, you could say, damage limitation. Once again, for the second race in a row, Red Bull not putting really a single foot wrong. Not just for Verstappen, but also for Perez as well.
And Tyson, we're going to talk about it in a bit more detail, but it seems now that the development of the cars is now starting to be an additional factor in this championship battle.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see when the teams decide, when do we stop focusing on this year? When do we give up? When do we start looking at next year?
Absolutely. So having a quick look now at the championship standings, and Max continues to lead the championship, extending his points up to 18 points. So Max is on 156 points and Lewis is on 138. If Max wins the next race and Lewis does not score the fastest lap point, then Max Verstappen will have at least a 25-point gap, a full race points gap between them. Sergio leading the best of the rest on 96. Lando Norris in position 4 on 86. Bottas on 74. Leclerc on 58. Carlos Sainz on 50 points. Gasly, after a poor performance, on 37. Ricciardo on 34. And rounding out the top 10, Sebastian Vettel on 30 points. In the Constructors' Championship, it is now a clear two-team battle for this year's Constructors' Championship. Red Bull leading by 252, also leading on 252 points by 40 points from Mercedes on 212. It's then a battle for best of the rest between McLaren and Ferrari. McLaren on 120, Ferrari on 108. AlphaTauri and Aston Martin battling out for 56, or 5th and 6th, 46 points, plays 44. Alpine keeping a watching brief in 7th on 31, and Alfa Romeo leading the back of the pack 2 points to Williams and Haas's 0. So we'll have a quick look at our final thoughts on the Styrian Grand Prix, and Honda's. It was regrettably a dull spectacle when we expected the opposite, given that we kind of predicted the opposite for France. Yeah, we thought it was going to be a dull Grand Prix. It was an absolute belter. Styria, just the complete opposite.
Yeah, considering it's such a short and fast circuit, you'd expect a few more spectacles, and it was a bit of disappointment. Having said that, we do, I suppose, have not only the advantage of hindsight, but also foresight, as considering this weekend we get to go again.
We do indeed get to. And Hollis, something that you noted. So looking at the tyre compounds that we're going to be using for this weekend. So the Styrian Grand Prix just gone. We used the C4, the C3, the C2, what were sort of known back in the day as the super soft, the soft, and the medium tyres. This weekend we're going different.
We are indeed. I was looking at Formula One. They have announced, Pirelli, that we're going for the softest three. We're going not so much for 4-3-2 as the C5, the C4, and the C3. That'll be interesting considering how many teams had an aversion to the C4 this weekend just gone. But for this weekend, it could be very interesting with the softer compounds, particularly when the forecast is set to be around 10 centigrade lower than the Styrian Grand Prix.
Well, we'll see if any of the drivers can put in any explosive laps on those C4 tyres. No pun intended. Tyson, we mentioned it earlier, the development battle between not just Red Bull and Mercedes, but all down the field, the teams are starting to have this dilemma of, do they stop the development of their 2021 car to focus on the massive rule changes to the car for 2022? It's a real dilemma for the teams.
Yeah, and I do think some of the teams might have got caught out by the fact that the rules were supposed to come in this year, but of course, other circumstances means now they have to wait one extra year. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting when the teams decide, do we just move on to next year's car already? I already understand that Haas already on the 2022 car, so we might see that from more teams.
So obviously it may give Haas an advantage going into next season. Hodders, we heard earlier in the week from Lewis that he's been told by Mercedes that they're not bringing any further updates to this year's car, but Mercedes coming out and saying there might be. So it's very tricky for Mercedes. They've clearly been caught out by a well-developed Red Bull car. So it could be a case, do they sacrifice this year's championship for next year's?
It's a tricky one. I mean, do you bring in upgrades now while you're down, or do you simply accept, as has been made pretty clear, that you have a slower car and you may not get it this year, but for next year you may have a better chance?
We'll see. Okay, so that's pretty much it from all of us. So just something to look out for the Austrian Grand Prix, which is this weekend. We're looking out for more spectators. We've been told that there are going to be 60,000 spectators in on race day. Possibly a fair few more of the Orange Army of Max Verstappen's nation. And we have got a forecast of moderate showers. But then again, we said that last week and it didn't really happen. So hopefully we'll get a little bit of precipitation to liven things up during qualifying or the race. As always, we'll be back next week with the Double Waved Yellows Austrian Grand Prix podcast to review all the action. And then we will be counting down towards the home Grand Prix, the British Grand Prix. More to come on that. And we might even be looking to throw one or two of our VSC podcasts in the mix. Hodders, Tyson, thanks very much for joining me as always. And no doubt we will be talking throughout the weekend during qualifying and the race for this weekend's race. My thanks finally to you for listening in. Don't forget, be good. And if you can't be good, be safe. From all of us here at Double Wave Yellows, take care and bye-bye.